Hey, what's up guys? My name is Jedith, and in this video we're going to be deciding for you, or for your friends, or for your family, or whoever, should you play or should you not play Havoc Demon Hunter in patch 10.1. I've had a lot of people come into my stream or ask me in Discord or, on YouTube, what is the state of Havoc? Is it any better? Is it any worse? Should I come back to the game? Should I main Havoc? Should I have Havoc as my alt? Everyone has these questions, so hopefully we can sort of clear this up today. There was an article posted on Wowhead by Shatterek. He is the Wowhead guide writer, and it's going to give us pros and cons, and hopefully this will help you decide. So let's get started. So first of all, this is the tier set. I've heard mixed reactions to the tier set from Aberrus. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Do you like this? Do you not like this? This is just one of the color variations of this set. For me personally, I'm a little let down by it, to be honest. I feel like it's very reminiscent of some of the other sets that we've had in the past. Like if you go on Wowhead and you look up some of the tier sets from this raid for different classes, right? There's the Priest set, which is probably the coolest tier set I've ever seen in the game. Ever. There's the Priest one, there's the Paladin one, which just looks insane. There's the Warrior one, which is just nuts. All the other classes got these really cool and impressive tier sets. And we get this set that just kind of looks like I don't know, like a budget Blood Elf heritage armor. It's just not very impressive. We also didn't get the color variants that some of the other classes got, so that's kind of disappointing. There's this really cool, like, light mint green variant that the Priests got. So, yeah, not too happy with this. There hasn't been a really good Demon Hunter set in a long time. Not too impressed with this, but anyways, let's move on. So, the first paragraph, here we go. Havoc Demon Hunter has had a unique and polarizing playstyle upon entering dragonflight, based around momentum and similar movement-based talents. Havoc is extremely unique in the way it must leverage its positioning and movements to consistently deal optimal DPS, especially around its burst, cooldown windows, I-beam, and essence break while utilizing initiative. So this is something that, like, is very polarizing between the community. A lot of people like playing momentum, and these are generally the people who are able to pull it off. The people who struggle with it, obviously, they dislike playing momentum, and they would much rather play the style of Havoc Demon Hunter in BFA or in Shadowlands, where it was very haste-based, and you would just plant and try to get out as many death sweeps and annihilations as possible, and I-beams, of course. But it's very different now. The playstyle is very different. You're kind of working around a 40-second burst cooldown window. Your positioning and your movement is super crucial to your success as a Havoc Demon Hunter. There's a whole nother level, I would say even a couple levels of complexity that you have to consider when you're playing Havoc. So it's very polarizing. I think coming into Dragonflight and introducing this new playstyle has really pushed a lot of players away from the spec. Constant damage with heavy burst on a 40-second cooldown timer has made it a desirable PvE choice in the expansion, with an on-demand burst being a powerful Mythic Plus tool, and it is keeping the theme entering Season 2 of Dragonflight. The current Havoc design has had a widely different reception when compared to previous expansions, with a large difference in players that love and hate the movement-based playstyle, which is not for everyone. Here's a table summarizing why you should and shouldn't play Havoc Demon Hunter in Dragonflight Season 2. So, why should you play Havoc Demon Hunter? Powerful burst damage on a short cooldown. Every about 40 seconds, you have this essence break window that you have to optimize and try to pull off successfully. That's kind of one of the things that people screw up the most when they're trying to learn Havoc. It's that essence break window. It's very easy to mess it up by, like, doing something that offsets the three things that you need to be lined up. There's Vengeful Retreat, there's Essence Break, and there's I-beam. The three of those things need to be lined up in terms of their cooldowns. If you do something out of order, it throws the whole process off. So it is a little punishing, but I think that kind of gets into the shouldn't column, but we'll get there in a second. Priority damage in AoE scenarios is high due to no change in rotation between AoE and single target. This is, yeah, for the most part, pretty true. Like the way that you play the class between AoE and single target, for the most part, is the same. There are going to be some, like, slight changes in between like what you prioritize within your essence break window in AoE and single target. In AoE, you're still putting throw glaives into your essence break window, even though they're not empowered by essence break. But in single target, you're then prioritizing annihilations over throw glaive. You shouldn't be throw glaving in single target, but either way, I know what this is getting at. The good thing about Havoc right now is that it's, once you learn how to play it one way, you can kind of just figure it out the other way, and it's essentially the same. You're just shifting out one or two things. Heavy AoE damage for free, regardless of build. This is true. Even in our single target build, we have things like Inner Demon. It's not as much AoE as we would get from like a Throw Glaive build, but we do also have these kind of cleave things within our single target build. Core gameplay feels rewarding around cooldowns. This is very true. This is like the one thing that kind of keeps me, and I know a bunch of other people playing Havoc, is that when you're able to successfully pull off these essence break windows, it's so rewarding because you do it right. The damage meters reflect that. You do it wrong, and they also reflect that, right? But yeah, when you do pull it off, it feels really good. That can be taken out of context, and it sounds really bad. Moving on. High self-sustain and base magic damage reduction for raid scenarios. This is true. We have things like Leech that really help us. We have things like Blur, and we also just have our demonic wards tattoos that give us base damage reduction, base magic damage reduction for raid. Why shouldn't you play Havoc? The first one, and I think the most important one, movement-based builds can be punished by multiple types of mechanics. This is the sole reason why a lot of people just don't play Havoc anymore, because it has that extra layer of complexity with movement that you have to consider. These are things that like other DPS specs, especially melee, just don't ever think about. Other melee classes don't need to know what's behind them 15 yards at all times. All they really need to focus on is, okay, what's in front of me? Where's the mob I'm targeting? If there's boss mechanics like a swirly on the ground, maybe to the in front of them and to the left, they're like, okay, I can't move that way. As a Havoc Demon Hunter, you have to be aware of your surroundings all the way around you, in front of you, behind you, to the left of you, to the right of you, and it's just like, it's insane. It's definitely a skill you kind of have to build up and practice, and a lot of people just don't like playing that way. So I think this is a strong first reason why you shouldn't play Havoc if you're just not into this. If you feel like you can't do it or you don't want to do it, it's not the playstyle you prefer, this is going to be the sole reason why you don't play the spec. Poor talent options to build towards pure single target encounters. So this is also very true. Our single target builds are pretty lackluster. A lot of the talent pathing doesn't quite make sense. It's a whole thing we can get into with the talent tree, where the single target is just super lacking, and it feels really bad to play. Defensive tools feel insufficient against physical damage, and consistent one-shot mechanics such as High Mythic Plus. So towards magic stuff, we're pretty decent, right? Because we have our tattoos. So our base magic damage reduction kind of carries us through that. And we have our leech and just like things like that, right? But when it comes to physical damage, all we have is Blur. And Blur is just dodge. It's dodge chance and damage reduction. But that's on a cooldown. Cooldown that like we can't always fully rely on all the time. There's a lot of things in Mythic Plus that will literally just one-shot you as Havoc that you can't do anything about. Like on High Mythic Plus, when you start doing really high keys in like an Algathar Academy on the bird boss, we were talking about this earlier in stream, once you get up to 4 stacks on the Screech, you're dead. You got to do something. You got to figure something out. You have to ask for an external. Maybe you have to run away and, LOS down the steps. Like, there's just no way for you to survive it. Whereas other classes have on-demand immunes, like a mage can ice block, paladins can bubble. There's different things that other classes can do, but we don't really have anything. We could Netherwalk, but for us to be willing to give up the damage it takes in terms of talents to take Netherwalk in a High Mythic Plus, it's got to be really dire. And that's, again, one of the negative things with our class right now. To take our defensives that we need, like Netherwalk, or to take something like our single target stun like Fell Eruption, we have to give up our damage talents, or 1 damage talent in our tree, which just feels really bad. Even if the difference is like 1% in terms of like overall damage, it still feels bad to have to give up damage to get something that we once had for free, or it was just like already part of our toolkit. So anyways, moving on. Minimal positive changes or bug fixes coming into Season 2. We didn't get much coming into Season 2. I'll be honest, I was hoping for more. I put out a video the other day. You can find a link to that up in the top right corner, where we talk about all the changes that Havoc is getting coming into Season 2. And it's okay. It's something. We'll take whatever we can get, but it's honestly not enough. And I do hope that maybe after the Race to World First, maybe we'll get some more tuning. Havoc utility in Mythic Plus and Raid. Havoc has a good amount of utility it can provide. Most are generally stronger in Mythic Plus scenarios instead of Raid. However, Chaos Brand makes Demon Hunter as a class almost required to bring one due to how powerful of a raid buff it is. So this is the 5% increased magic damage taken. So you kind of just need this, at least one Demon Hunter in your raid to provide this. So this is buffing so many other classes in your raid, like, you know, the Warlocks, which are already super OP. We have the Mages, not even just like ranged classes, but there are definitely some melee classes that do magic damage, and they benefit from this as well. So a full list of the utility Havoc Demon Hunters bring is Chaos Brand. We just spoke about that. Imprison can be used as a true out-of-combat CC to skip past mobs or stop patrols. So what this means is when you have a mob imprisoned, you can walk right up to it and it won't aggro onto you. It's completely CC'd and you don't have to worry about getting too close to it and aggroing it. You can use this for skips, for stopping patrols, and you can also use it as sort of a extra stop in Mythic Plus to stop casts. Consume Magic. It's a short cooldown purge of enemy magic effects. Again, this is a thing unique to Havoc where we get a purge, and it also, if you talent into it, can give you Fury back. Oftentimes we don't take that talent, but it is an option that you can get. If you know you're going to be doing a lot of purging, you can take that talent. It's a good thing to have if you don't have a shaman in your group, or I don't know what else purges, to be honest, but it's a good thing to have. Chaos Nova AoE stun can either be used to help your tank kite or to cancel important casts. This is something that I'm finding I'm using more often now in Dragonflight than I was in like Shadowlands or BFA. And this is because we had access to Fell Eruption in those expansions, whereas now we don't. So the reason that like using Fell Eruption was better is because it was single target. If you're using Chaos Nova and everyone else in your group is also AoE stunning, you can stun DR the mobs very quickly, especially mobs that you don't mean to be stunning. So while this is good to have, it can sort of like honestly screw you at certain points, because other people in your group might be like throwing down a cap totem or you know, whatever AoE stuns they have. You put out too many AoE stuns at once and then the entire pack that you're fighting is stun DR'd. Just something to keep in mind with this. Sigil of Misery, AoE Disorient, can be used as a cast stop, but is less useful due to the 2-second trigger time. This is something I've always had an issue with, even when playing Vengeance, because like, yes, we have all this utility in our sigils. You have to be able to predict like the trigger time of these sigils and hope that like you line it up in a way that when they actually explode, they do what you need to do and you haven't missed the cast or you haven't put it down too early. There are some other setbacks with this where there's a bug currently where if something is affected by your Sigil of Misery, so first of all, let's backtrack. There's a talent called Misery and Defeat. Misery and Defeat makes anything affected by your Sigil of Misery take increased damage for like a couple seconds. So for one, this is forcing us to use our utility for damage, meaning you're probably not using it when you need the utility, you're using it when you want to do more damage. So it's essentially nullifying the utility aspect of this. Secondly, when things are affected by that Misery and Defeat debuff, I guess you would call it, it's also putting the mob out of combat. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know why it's happening, but when the targets are affected by this debuff from Misery and Defeat, it stops things from spreading. So like if you press Throw Glaive, your glaive won't apply Soul Rend to all of them. It won't bounce. A Shaman's Flame Shock, I believe, or like a Paladin's Avenger's Shield just won't bounce. So it's actually like preventing damage for the rest of your group for the short time that this debuff is on the mobs. It's a bug that's been around for a while. DKs can't grip, that's another one, yeah. We've reported it, and I believe they recently became aware that this is a thing, so they'll be looking into it. and hopefully it gets fixed soon. But there's a lot of like layers to this Sigil of Misery shit that like it's just causing a lot of problems. Moving on, Darkness. Group and raid defensive can be nice for some rot mechanics. However, the RNG aspect makes Darkness fairly undesirable in most situations. So with Darkness, like, it is RNG, right? So you could drop it for like a big burst of damage that's coming out, and it could just not prevent the damage, right? Because it's a chance. So there is a bit of RNG to Darkness. In like situations where your tank is getting pummeled by a lot of mobs, it works really well. Or if there's like ticking group-wide damage, it works in that sense. But Darkness is nice, but there are some times where I just wish it was a bit more guaranteed, for sure. Fel Eruption, we already spoke about this. If required, it can be talented for a short cooldown single target stun for cast stops. However, it's traded for DPS. So yeah, you have to give up. A damage talent to be able to take this. Mortal Dance, unique AoE. Mortal Strike, the powerful tool against Sanguine in Mythic Plus, and could potentially see niche usage outside of Sanguine. So I don't do PvP, meaning I don't really take this talent. There are some Sanguine weeks though where I have tried using it, and I think it does save some time, because, you know, as good as your tank might be, there are going to be some, you know, moments here and there where the mobs do get kind of dragged through some Sanguine puddles, and this does prevent it a little bit. But again, you are giving up something to take this talent, right? So you're sacrificing something in your tree that's probably giving you a bit of DPS just to take this, but it is a time saver in a sense. I think this will be less important now after they've reduced... I forget what they did with Sanguine exactly, but they did something to Sanguine going into this next season to make it a bit more friendly. So I feel like Mortal Dance might lose a little bit of value after that. But let's move on to the damage profile strengths. Havoc has a few different positives to how it deals damage. In single target and AoE scenarios, the rotation does not change. This causes Havoc to deal great priority damage while doing all the AoE damage it will always deal, which is very desirable in all scenarios to be able to choose where a large portion of your damage is going. Havoc also has a powerful amount of burst damage around I-Beam and Essence Break on a 40-second cooldown, with a larger burst and sustained single target provided by Metamorphosis, which is always preferable over a flat damage profile. So yeah, we do have a lot of good burst, and this is kind of getting a little better with the buffs and changes that we've got going into 10.1, especially in Mythic Plus. They made some changes where previously we were very AoE heavy, and our single target was really bad. On a Tyran week where you're fighting a boss for like, you know, 3-4 minutes, you can really notice it on the meters. But then, you know, when you're clearing trash, you're blasting it, right? They've made some changes going into 10.1 where they're shifting a little bit out of our AoE and giving us a little bit more priority damage and single target. Not an insane amount, but just enough to make it feel a little bit better and a little bit more balanced. Havoc survivability in Raid. The sustain of Havoc via talents such as Soul Rending, Collective Anguish, Demonic Appetite, and Charred Warblades is exceptionally high, causing your health bar to consistently pop back quickly after dangerous mechanics. The passive DR of Demonic Wards and Illidari Knowledge makes Havoc not exceptionally susceptible to magic damage, which makes up the bulk of raid mechanics. Blur is also up for dangerous raid mechanics consistently on a short 1-minute cooldown. Altogether in raids, this makes Havoc one of the most powerful defensive options for the damage profiles raid bosses typically output. So when I'm going into a new raid boss in a new raid, there's a couple things I think about. Where am I using meta? If there's like a spot in the boss fight where like there's like maybe a damage amp phase where you have to like maybe line up your potion or do whatever, right? You got to think about that stuff. But then also I think about where am I using Blur? Because it's on a 1-minute cooldown, right? But you also don't want to just be using it haphazardly. You want to use it as much as you can, but you also want to use it where you especially need it. And Blur is super powerful. It increases your chance to dodge by 50% and reduces all damage taken by 20% for 10 seconds. It's very powerful. And then on top of that, we have Demonic Wards, so magic damage taken reduced by 10%. We also have extra leech happening between Soul Rending and Charred Warblades. Then we're also getting health back from Collective Anguish and Demonic Appetite. So we have a lot of self-healing in raids. A lot of the times you don't really have to think about it, it just happens, but there are certain situations where you do need to be a little bit more conscientious of your healing and try to utilize it the best you can. So let's move down to the talent buffs. Late into this cycle, Havoc Demon Hunter received some buffs to a couple of talents. Previously unused talent Serrated Glaive was changed, causing it additionally to now buff the damage of Chaos Strike and Annihilation, as well as the previous I-Beam. Accelerated Blade received an excellent rework. Instead of dealing additional damage per bounce of Throw Glaive, it now deals significantly more damage on the initial target, and the damage falls off per bounce. This rework caused a good increase in Havoc's priority damage and single target damage of the AoE focused builds, while being a very minor nerf in 3+ targets. It is a welcome change. This is what I was mentioning earlier, how they sort of shaved off a little bit of our AoE and shifted a bit of it into our single target. That's where this happened between these two talents here, Serrated Glaive and Accelerated Blade. So, moving on to why you shouldn't play Havoc Demon Hunter in Dragonflight Season 2. So there are still some remaining bugs. With Season 2 well on the way, there is a long list of bugs for Havoc that have gone untouched so far, which I will list below. So the first one, Chaos Theory does not empower the offhand Chaos Strike hit with the additional critical strike chance. This one was actually fixed. This was fixed. Blade Dance causes your next Chaos Strike within 8 seconds to have a 14 to 30% increased critical strike chance and will always refund Fury. So Chaos Strike is 2 hits. It is a main hand hit and an offhand hit. So previously, the main hand hit was only benefiting from the increased crit, whereas the offhand wasn't, because the buff was falling off before the offhand hit happened. They have now fixed that. Fixing it was like a 1% increase to our damage, roughly. Nothing major, but it is nice to get it fixed for sure. Soul Rend damage over time application can be parried. This is horrible, man. It's chaos damage. How do you parry chaos damage? Throw Glaive can also be parried, causing a double parry chance on Soul Rend. Horrible. Horrible, horrible. So how it works is Throw Glaive, you press Throw Glaive, right? Your glaive hits a mob, and that hit applies a dot of chaos damage. So both of these can be parried. The glaive itself can be parried. If that glaive still hits, the application of Soul Rend can then be parried. Burning Wound, damage over time application, can be parried. Apparently that dot, which is also chaos damage, magic damage, can be parried. How does that work? How do you parry magic? I don't know. Demon Blades can be parried despite the melee attack successfully hitting. So again, this is an auto attack. Our auto attacks have a chance to do, they always do shadow damage. So that shadow damage can be parried, even though the actual auto attack lands. Again, doesn't make sense. How do you parry magic damage? Sigil of Misery and the entire duration of Misery and Defeat cause spread effects to stop triggering, such as Throw Glaive, Primordial Wave, and Avenger's Shield, and causes pets to stop attacking. That's what I forgot when I was talking about this a second ago. It causes Warlock pets and Hunter pets to stop attacking the mobs. For a BM Hunter, that's disastrous. Absolutely disastrous. I mean, they're probably only missing a GCD or 2, because their pets just like assist whatever they hit, so they probably get back on the mobs pretty quickly, but still. That sucks, man. When fodder to the flame demon spawns, it's not immediately active and will evade. This often causes it to not give initiative despite being struck first. I've noticed this so many times. If I'm fighting a mob and a demon spawns right in front of me and I'm I-beaming while it spawns, see evade pop up on my screen. And because it's evading, yet it's still being hit, I'm not getting initiative. When casting the Hunt, it can pull things in a straight line ahead of your charging path, often pulling packs 30 to 40 yards away. I'm not sure I've experienced this one personally, but I can imagine that's super frustrating. This used to happen in Shadowlands, but from what I understood, it would happen because it just didn't have anything around it to spread the dot to, so it would jump like behind you, and it would put the dot on something like behind you. I've never had it happen in Dragonflight, but I believe this. I wouldn't be surprised if this is still happening. While this is not a comprehensive list of all Havoc bugs, it is a list of the most recent and problematic bugs. Original issues such as Fell Rush clipping the ground and shooting you significantly further than intended still exists. This bug has existed since as long as I've played, which is like as long as I've played Demon Hunter, which is like end of Legion. It exists, it never won't exist. Bad talent tree changes. In patch 10.0.7, Havoc received a couple of minor node changes in their spec tree to make talents such as Netherwalk and Fell Eruption more accessible and easier to take. However, these changes had the reverse of the intended effect, locking the raid builds out of Fell Eruption without committing an extra point to a very low value talent. For the Mythic Plus build, Netherwalk was also locked behind an additional talent in Improved Chaos Strike, requiring a massive loss in DPS to drop 2 talent points to take Netherwalk. This is what I was saying earlier, you have to give up a DPS talent to get some of this utility that, like, in higher keys you need. You need Netherwalk to survive some of the one-shots because our defensives are so lackluster. Fell Eruption, it's just nice to have. I miss having it. We just always had it in BFA and Shadowlands. It feels strange to not have it. Tier set downgrade. So, believe it or not, our new tier set in 10.1 provides us less of a damage increase than our tier set in the first season. So, equipping our new tier set is actually a damage loss. The Havoc Demon Hunter tier set for Season 2 is not by design bad, but it is, however, tuned weaker than our previous tier set from Season 1 and the majority of the sets of other specs in Season 2. While it did receive a buff, it stayed unfortunately low value, and instead of receiving another buff, the old Season 1 4-set bonus was nerfed from 8% to 5% damage, instead to force us to swap off of it sooner. Outside of tuning concerns, the tier set does nothing to change how the spec plays, existing as an almost entirely passive set, except for the minor fury gains, making some builds feel less fury starved. Yeah, I mean, our tier set bonus in Season 2 is so underwhelming that they had to go back and nerf our tier set in Season 1 to make sure that we don't just go back and use our first tier set, because that would actually be better for us. So they had to go back and nerf that to make sure that wouldn't happen. Instead of fixing the tier set bonus in Season 2, they nerfed the Season 1 bonus to make that less enticing. Explain to me how that makes sense. Lack of class changes. In general, Havoc is mostly the exact same class it was on Dragonflight launch, with no changes to the rotational playstyle. While there has been a couple of changes slated for Season 2, they were targeted previously unused or AoE talent build talents. Havoc struggles at doing pure single target and doesn't have the option to talent into powerful single target talents in general, leaving many players frustrated that nothing had been changed. It is also worth noting that there has been an exceptional amount of players unhappy with momentum and the movement-based playstyle being significantly stronger, which has thus far seen no signs of changing for Season 2 of Dragonflight. Yeah, we're forced into playing momentum, and not just the momentum talent, but a build where movement is required. Whether it's fell rushing for momentum, fell rushing for fury with isolated prey, or using vengeful retreat for initiative. No matter what way you spin it, you're going to be moving as part of your rotation. No matter what you do. And any build that doesn't do any of that is significantly behind. Single target tuning. Havoc struggles to do good damage in pure single target scenarios. This does not mean it always does bad single target in all cases. When it comes to Mythic Plus or to priority damage in AoE fights, Havoc excels at pumping extreme amounts of AoE for free while dealing the full single target damage it can do. However, there are little to no options to swap around talents to allow Havoc to deal better with single target DPS in scenarios that have little to no cleave or AoE. This is unlike the majority of other specs in the game, leaving it with an extremely large weakness coming into Season 2 of Dragonflight, with the fights in Aberrus, the Shadowed Crucible looking largely single target focused. This is honestly pretty concerning, because a lot of the bosses in the raid, like this article says, are single target. There's a fight where there's like the 2 elementals, and you might think like, oh, I'm gonna get to cleave on both of these. No. You keep them separate. It's like Eye of the Jailer, right? Where you have 2 separate groups. There might be a strat at some point where you bring them closer and you try to do what you can, but it's essentially a single target fight. I honestly think Havoc is going to be on the lower end of the charts when it comes to this raid, unfortunately, unless something else happens in terms of tuning and balance. Defensive capabilities and high keys. While Havoc has an exceptionally powerful defensive toolkit for the majority of raid scenarios and low to mid-level Mythic Plus, this is typically not the case for high-end Mythic Plus. At the highest of push keys, Havoc struggles with having very few tools to deal with large hits, specifically physical damage. Physical damage is a massive issue, but the 20% damage reduction of Blur can be too little to cover a mechanic. While Blur is typically also the only took Havoc. Okay, there's some typos and grammar in here. I swear I'm not... I don't know. While Blur is typically also the only Took, Havoc has beyond a niche talent in Demon Muzzle. I don't know. Am I reading it wrong, or am I crazy? I gave it about 7 tries. It still didn't make sense. While Netherwalk is an option that can be taken, it is a significant enough DPS loss that it is typically avoided, and Havoc has to rely on other classes' external defensive options to live many mechanics. Especially anything on a timer that is shorter than 1 minute. So, yeah, as you can see, there are still a lot of issues when it comes to Havoc. If you stopped playing Havoc back in BFA or in Shadowlands, and you want to come back for Dragonflight, I have bad news for you. Havoc is not the same spec, it's not the same playstyle that you remember. It's incredibly different, and it's going to take a lot of time to get used to it. Not to say it's hard. It's not a hard spec, but it's very different. It's very rewarding when you can pull it off. It's very punishing when you don't pull it off. All I can say is there's a lot to learn, but when you can learn it, it's very rewarding. And if you're looking to learn it, hey, I have an entire YouTube channel, countless videos of guides and resources for you to use, so you should have no problem whatsoever. We do pretty incredible DPS in terms of like AoE. So in Mythic Plus, it's a lot of fun to play. I will give it that. It's super fun to blast and you know, do big numbers. You can often top the meters in your Mythic Plus, not just pull to pull, but in the overall at the end. Generally, if you're playing well, you will be at the top. We do have a lot of utility that we can use to our advantage. And again, once you are, you know, successfully using that utility and, you know, stopping casts and, you know, helping with skips and whatnot, all of that is really rewarding too. And then the final thing I will say is, like, I feel like the playstyle of Havoc is very different. It's not like any other melee spec. It's definitely not like a range spec. It's a lot like playing an action game. So if you're a fan of, like, you know, sitting down in front of your PS5 and playing an action game where it's like very fast paced and pressing a lot of buttons, you'll probably enjoy Havoc. So yeah, that's all I can say at the moment. I'm still playing Havoc. I will still be maining it because I do think there is hope for us yet. I feel like the single target damage can be fixed and potentially will be fixed in the near future. Personally, I just have a lot of fun playing it, and I like talking about it and learning about it and just, you know, digging deep into the mechanics and the, you know, everything about it. So would I recommend it to you? Yes, I would recommend that you at least try it, give it a shot, and then you can decide from there. All right, so that's it. If you like this video, give it a like, sub to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you are looking to play this class in the future, or in the upcoming patch, make sure you sub to the channel, because as I said, this channel is chock full of resources and videos that you can use to your advantage to make yourself a better player. All right, I'll catch you next time. Peace.